Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Passionately Curious podcast, a place where we talk to solopreneurs around the world who are doing remarkable work, and we learn from each other's journey to move forward and do the work that matters. Today, I'm excited to have Ineke Camille with us. She's a podcast manager from Netherlands, and she's a generous and a wonderful human being. And I'm really happy to have her here and have this conversation with her. Ineke started her solopreneurship journey in 2016, and she started as a VA. But her enthusiasm with the podcast as a medium made her specialize in becoming a podcast manager. We'll learn more about it from Ineke in this conversation, and I think there are a lot of gems that we are going to uncover in this conversation. So, Ineke, very warm welcome to this podcast conversation. How are you doing?
Hi, thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for that very generous introduction.
Yeah, I don't think I did justice to your introduction, but let's see. But Ineke, let's go back to 2016. Let's go back to the time when you decided to make the switch into solopreneurship, and tell me about what was going in your mind. Like how difficult was that decision emotionally, financially, like to switch from a full-time job to a freelancer or to a solopreneurship role? And what was the role that your family played in that decision as you made that choice?
Yeah. Well, the big factor in, that life-changing thing was that we moved to the Netherlands from Seychelles. And at the time I had two young boys and I had just found out that I was pregnant. And
Mhm,
so there was a lot of things happening. And I knew, we had moved two young boys into a new country where at the time they didn't know the language, they didn't know people. And I knew my main job as mum was
mhm,
to ease their introduction, or introduction into the country, into the culture and everything, and just make that as smooth as possible. And so I decided to not go down the traditional job route so that I could be available. But being a solopreneur is not without its challenges. I am a very sociable person. I am a very tactical person. I want to
mhm,
touch, I want to hug. And sitting, literally sitting on my dining room table all alone,
mhm,
day in, day out, is
mhm.
hard. It is
Yeah.
hard, but it gives me the flexibility to do the things for my family that I need to do. And my boys, and then later my daughter, they are my priority, and making sure that they thrive in this place that I expressively moved for them. So
Mhm,
their ability to thrive and to make this the most of this new place, new culture, and everything, that is my focus. But I also came from a work background that I loved what I did.
mhm,
I chose not to go into traditional full-time work, but I ran
mhm,
a magazine, and tell you, it sets your heart on fire. It is just amazing. It is just like a
mhm,
thrill. And so while I moved into the online space, I knew I wanted to look for that thing that really fired me up.
mhm,
And virtual assistant, like for many other people, is that doorway into the world of the online space. But like many
mhm,
others, I soon knew that I wanted to niche, but I didn't know what that thing was. And it was only after years and years of talking about how much I loved podcasts and making this recommendation and that recommendation, someone suggested to me, and unfortunately, I don't know who that someone is. And I feel really bad about that because they were pivotal in how my
mhm,
life turned out. And they suggested, why don't you do podcast management? And
mhm,
it was like, huh? Like,
mhm,
you don't know what you don't know. And it was just like this whole world opened up to me. I mean, I was already a fan of podcasting or podcasts, but I had no idea that it was a job. Like I never thought about it, but if I did, I was thinking audio techs or studio rooms. Like I didn't it wasn't even on my radar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just such an honor to be able to facilitate the people I work with are doing such fundamental, impact changing, big things. And I'm a
Mm-hmm.
part of that. And it feels
Yeah.
really, really good. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
it,
awesome.
yeah.
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 Yeah. That's inspiring at so many levels. I want to come back to podcast management, but before I go there, I want to talk about being a mom and making this transition from a full-time job to solopreneurship or freelancing. And the reason why I'm going deep into this is a lot of the audience members are in such a place
Of
where they
course. Yes.
feel, and both guys and like men and women,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of men also want flexibility in their life, spend more time with
Yes.
family, or
Yeah.
pursue
Of course.
certain hobbies. But it's also very scary for a lot of people to make that change of going from a certain salary coming at the end of the month to not knowing where the next uh,
Yeah.
payment is
Of
going to come
course.
from. So,
Mm-hmm.
if you can talk a bit about that transition of when you left the job, did you already have a client? How did you go about finding your initial few clients? What tips would you have for someone who is trying to like make
Yeah.
the
Of
switch?
course. Um, Financially, I had the support of my husband, who said for a small time he would give me time to get my feet wet and
Mhm,
see what could become of it, because like many of our spouses, he doesn't understand the world that I'm in, and
mhm,
he just trusted that I would figure it out,
mhm,
and I'm very thankful for his trust. But it's it's a challenge. It's a challenge for sure, because it's also very how you work as a solopreneur is very different from how you work as in the traditional job. So the
yeah.
structure is very different, and that was a big challenge for me, like figuring out my time and not being accountable to anyone but myself. That was a
Mhm,
struggle. But in
mhm,
terms of having clients, if I'm honest, I think I spent the first 6 months just trying to learn as much as I could, because while I wanted to go into the online space, that's
mhm,
not my background. I had no concept of what it was. It was just when I arrived, I spent time just in Facebook groups, seeing what the people were talking about, and the online space was mentioned, being a virtual assistant was mentioned. So the
mhm,
first 6 months, I was just exploring that. And then my first proper step was maybe 3 months in, where I joined a course about how to be a virtual assistant. But
mhm,
I think more than that, it was how to set up your business to be a virtual assistant. What are the
mhm,
things that you need to be thinking about in order to put yourself out there? And yes, the focus was a virtual assistant, but it really would apply for any service that you wanted to
mhm,
offer.
mhm,
And so I started thinking about, oh, I need to have a name. I need to have some branding so that when I'm putting myself out there, there's some sort of consistency. And again, though, I had no experience. So because of the agreement with my partner, I put myself out there and I started volunteering. I did
mhm,
some work, not necessarily for yes, I got a referral, but was more to get the experience to find
mhm,
out, did I like doing that thing or did I not? And
mhm,
through that, I was able to identify that I really thrived with community management and customer service.
mhm,
And so that's where I went. And then I started putting myself out there. But in those 6 months, I was really active in building relationships and just growing my own personal and professional community. So I
mhm,
didn't know what I wanted or didn't want to do, but I knew I
mhm.
was going to need people in my corner. So I
Yeah,
just had a lot of coffee chats and just got to know people like genuinely.
yeah.
And so when that time came that I kind of knew what I wanted,
Mhm,
there was someone who I knew who was in the space. And I saw a couple of posts that she had made about, oh, she's struggling and this, and wouldn't it be nice to have support? But she never actually made the ask.
mhm,
Um, she and I had messaged a couple of times on a friendly basis. But then I remember I was sitting on the train and we'd gone to visit wherever it was. And we were sitting on the train. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take the leap. And I remember I got my phone out and I sent her a message. It's like, hey, could we have a talk and see if I could support you? Because I'm interested in being a VA and I think you might need support. And she's like, oh my God, yes. And like, that was the quickest yes I've ever had. And I just really believe that if you put yourself out there, you don't know what can come. And that's been, whether as a VA or as a podcast manager, that has been how I've gotten most of my work. It's been either through the ask or through referrals, but it's really off the backs of building those relationships.
Yeah.
And so then I started putting myself out there, and through her, I got another referral and another referral. And for like the first 2 years, it was a slow growth because also my focus was the family, but I wanted to be building my business because I knew there was going to be a time where I was going to be able to dive in. And so I wanted that foundation to be there so that when I was ready to focus on my business, I had a business to focus on. So I did that for 2 years. And then, like I mentioned before, when I was interested in niching and getting more serious about the business, I was exploring some different things. I looked at Pinterest and I just explored some different things. But as much as I enjoyed community management, I knew that wasn't the thing that was a niche. I was just a VA who did community management. But yeah, the big thing for me and really rooting my business was moving into podcast management and knowing, okay, this is my thing. This is what I want to be known for. And it's been great.
Yeah, this is so good. Like what I see, what you shared, and what I really want to repeat so that people hear it out is, what does putting yourself out there means? And you talked about building the community, listening to the conversations, and understanding what challenges people are facing, and being there in the groups and all this. What are people talking about? How are they, like, what are the problems they are facing? So I see so much of what you shared is something that a lot of people can learn from, because a lot of people give this advice: just be there on social media, just keep bombarding your messages out there.
Sometimes
But
you just need to listen and observe.
Yeah, but this hard work of actually being in front of a human being and helping them out and building that community, and also this very challenging thing of putting yourself on the spot and offering someone, saying, hey,
it was someone that I really wanted to work with. To be fair, you've got to really want it.
Yeah, but it's a lot of times what we do is we keep putting things out there, but we never
make the ask.
We didn't. And for you to say, hey, I can help you by doing this, is such a challenging thing. And the more people do this, like the reason people don't do this is because they're afraid of the rejection. So they say, okay, people will obviously figure out my website and they will obviously know that I do this. So they will obviously reach out to me on their own. But like mostly, at least in solopreneurship space, at least when we are starting, it's always good to like propose, and maybe sometimes it will not work and maybe it will work. But yeah, it's amazing. I want to talk about next is from the perspective of someone who wants to hire a VA or hire a podcast manager, and we'll go very specific into podcast management next. But for an entrepreneur or a solopreneur or someone who is running a team who is doing everything on their own or whatever, but they are not hiring a VA or not hiring a podcast manager, from the other side of the table, how would you recommend they work this out? Like, what can they do to hire someone they trust or someone that works well for them? Like, what are the insights that you can share regarding that?
I would say have a couple of calls with people who are qualified. But the main thing would be hiring someone you really vibe with and you have that connection with. But I think often it's it's not even knowing, like, especially when I speak about a virtual assistant, but it's often virtual assistant, it's such a big term, and it's not often clear what a virtual assistant does, because so many virtual assistants claim that they do everything. Well, that's just not possible. Like, you cannot do everything and do it well. That's just, like, it's unrealistic. So people are often daunted with the idea of hiring a virtual assistant because it's still very vague. So I think maybe working with someone who does almost like a matchmaking service to introduce you to the right virtual assistant can be very helpful. And then otherwise, just going online and being part of these groups and seeing what the different services are, so that when you're creating your job application, you can be very clear about what you need, and then be aware of what is available out there and what kinds of people can fit your needs.
Okay, that's very helpful advice. Let's just giving people a space to start somewhere. So you mentioned the Facebook groups and communities a couple of times. Are there any, maybe a couple of groups that you would recommend to the audience to start with, somewhere that they can start finding their people, or how can they find these groups?
If someone is interested in becoming a virtual assistant, or someone is interested in finding a virtual assistant?
Actually, both. So if there are different groups for both, you can tell both.
So in order to become a virtual assistant, there are many groups. But my favorite, and I say that because I actually worked with her, is it's Start, Grow, and something, your business. It's not coming to me now. And it's by Maria Caris, and she is a gem. And there are lots of VA coaches out there, but Maria really, really cares about her VAs. And so I loved working with her.
Awesome.
But from the other side, there are so many. I would say, as an entrepreneur myself, as a solopreneur, the big one has been the female FEA, so Female Entrepreneur Association, run by Carrie Green. And that's been where I found some of the jobs, and where I see other people finding their VAs, because it's such a warm and safe space, and it's a very supportive space where primarily women are supporting. Yeah, it is women where women are supporting each other. And so if it's a woman, that would be it's a really good group to be part of.
Awesome. We'll share these details in the show notes so that people can go and share the links for these groups as well. But this is really helpful. So let's come back to podcast management. And so what is podcast management?
Essentially, podcast management is the idea that the host records their message, records the audio, and then focuses on crafting that message, which will impact their audience. And the idea is that they then send it to their podcast manager, and ideally they're done. So depending on the different packages, the core of it is that the podcast manager will edit the content and then upload it, create some graphics, and take care of the back end for the host, and then just send the audio file to the host when it's done, and so that they have the records. But essentially the back end is done, and then the host will then just share the content and promote the episode. But there are different packages. For example, with myself, I also offer repurposing, so that we're creating more content for one piece of audio. And we're also now moving into video editing, so that we can optimize YouTube, because YouTube had gone down for a little while, but in the last year we've seen it coming back strong. And so a lot of my clients are repurposing to YouTube as well, and which is fantastic, because the SEO on YouTube is really, really good. the SEO on podcasts, in contrast, is not so great, but that is also growing. So that is promising. But as a podcast manager, it's just trying to make it as easy as possible for our clients to get their message out there and to make the impact that they want to make.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I hear from what you're saying is, if someone is serious about using podcast and YouTube as a channel for their business, like, then it makes sense to have a podcast manager, because otherwise the back end issues will like take over and you will not be as consistent with your like production.
I
And
think I think the main thing about having a podcast manager is, again, that main thing, having that consistency, but it's also saving them time, because having a podcast and having a YouTube and repurposing it to all the places, it is a great idea, but it is time consuming. And so by hiring a podcast manager, you are saving yourself time, obviously, and you're still getting that, you're getting all that output from the content that you've created. Because let's face it, it's the host that's doing the hard work. It's crafting that message that is the hardest. And then, hiring a podcast manager means that we do the back end stuff, and we put it out there, or we create the content so that they can then repurpose it. But it's essentially, the most important thing, I think, is saving them the time so that they can focus on the things that, where they are, it's their thing. It's their, where they bring out the magic.
Yeah. Agree. I totally get it. Like, if you are serious about your podcast and if you can afford a podcast manager, then I think it's a no-brainer to like, and it will lead to a lot of growth, because this is a growth channel. Like, the YouTube and podcasts are the places where you get your audience. I want to pivot to a space where someone is considering starting a podcast. And what would be your, like, what would you recommend them to do? You can mention specific tools or specific ways in which they can go about this. What would be your recommendation for someone who has been thinking about starting a podcast for long, but they just can't get it started? They can't figure out like the stuff.
I think before you even consider starting a podcast, you have the idea, but you really need to sit down and consider whether you'll be able to create that content consistently, because podcasting is a long-term game. Like, you are not going to get the results in the next month, 3 months. It's more like 6 months and 12 months down the line. So you have to be in it for the long term. And you've really got to think long and hard about crafting that message, and think about what is that because podcast is great, and as a listener, I love podcasts, but it's not an easy business. Crafting those messages, making sure you promote it, doing all the things is not easy. Yes, if you have a higher package, the podcast manager and a team can take care of a lot of that. But that crafting of the message and the intellectual property that you have to create, it's not easy. So you've got to really commit to that. And so I would say, think about who your audience is, exactly what they need to hear, how you're going to deliver it, and think about your content pillars. Are you going to have solo episodes? Are you going to have guests? What kind of frequency are you going to be doing? And think about that first. When it goes to actually producing a podcast, I would say, even if you can't hire a podcast manager on a month-to-month basis, hire one at least for your launch and for creating your two tail ends of your episodes. So the back end is not difficult, but it is tricky. And the things behind the scenes are often changing. One platform does an update, there's a change here or there. So it can be tricky and time consuming. So I would just recommend hiring someone within your budget to actually do your launch, and then to help you with the intro and the outro. so that you have a bit of a professional finish. And then in terms of your setup, you don't need the most expensive setup. You don't need the most expensive mic, but you do need a mic. So think about your mic. Ideally, if you're using headphones, use the headphones that just go over your ears, or AirPods, rather than the ones that have the wires, because they tend to move. And while you are recording, you don't necessarily hear it, but when editing and from the listener perspective, you will hear that movement. Think about your space when you're recording. Trying to make sure that your internet connection is stable. My dog is sleeping on the sofa right there. That is not ideal. I'm hoping she stays sleeping. So ideally, the dog is sleeping or not in the room. And yeah, and just get started and have fun with it. Have fun with it. When it comes to editing, there are lots of software out there. I would say start with the free one and the widely available, and that's called Audacity. And again, if you can't hire a podcast manager, there's plenty of tutorials on YouTube, and just learn the basics. Like, it doesn't have to be fancy, just learn the basics and get your content out there. Because the truth is, I've listened, and I do listen to plenty of podcasts where the audio is not fantastic all the time, but if your message is sound, then your audience will forgive you.
Yeah, this is so useful, and I really like the fact that just have fun. Like, if you're just starting and you don't have, like, if somebody's coming in to podcast space with, I don't know, 100,000 Instagram followers, then maybe they can hire someone to, like,
Of course,
do it professionally. But if you're just starting and you have like 100 listeners, you can play around. You can, like, those listeners are there to listen to you. So initially you can play around and figure out your message, and then you can, like, start.
100%. And then also, like, you are a new podcaster coming in. Don't compare yourself to someone who's been running a podcast for 3 years or even a year. Like, don't compare your chapter 1 to someone's chapter 8. Like, just go with it and have fun. But you even said like 100 followers. If your 100 followers are engaged and are acting on the things that you want them to act on, whether that's signing up for a webinar or buying an offer, or sharing their offer with someone else, if your 100 people are acting on the things you want them to act on, 100 people is fine. You don't necessarily need a big audience. You just need an audience that is reacting to the things that you want them to react to.
Yeah, and if I would mention Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fan article. Like, you can just search it on Google. So Kevin Kelly, 1,000 True Fans. It talks about exactly the thing that you're saying. Like, if you have 100 true fans, that may be enough.
Exactly.
Like,
the true, yes, that's a perfect term. The true fans.
Yeah. But amazing. So we are going to, like, move to a different territory now, and I want to talk about the challenges of the solopreneurship journey.
Many challenges.
Yeah, and I just want to, like, talk about these, and we can share with each other also, and then the audience can also relate to these challenges. And before we jump in, I want to share why we are talking about it, is because a lot of people who have not been on this side of the table, they feel like they can't relate to those challenges. And a lot of people jump into solopreneurship or freelancing thinking that it's going to be easier than than having a job or having a boss. And so yeah, just want to share, just want to talk about that journey and those challenges.
It's now that I'm a few years in, it's comedy when someone says, they've just started and they've applied to 3 jobs and they don't have a job. Like, what's going on? I was like, well, like, if you were in the real world and you're applying to jobs, like, you don't think you're just going to apply to 3 jobs. Like, people really believe that it is easier, but it's like, it's still applying for jobs. It's still trying to stand out from from all the noise. And it's like, it's not easier, it's just more flexible.
Mhm.
And in often ways, was that saying, we quit a full-time job. Was that you quit a 40-hour full-time job so that you can work 80 hours for yourself? And that's the thing. Like, I don't work 80 hours, thank God. But the big thing is that you're working for yourself. You choose when to work. If you need to work at 10 o'clock at night so that you can pick up your kid at 3 p.m., that is your choice. That is your privilege and whatever it is.
Mhm.
But the online space is difficult. And when you don't have, like myself, you don't have that background knowledge, it can be scary, and it can be, what the heck am I doing? Because no one around me knew anything about the online space, much less what a virtual assistant was. No one in my family, now in my family, yes, because the concept has grown, but initially it's a very lonely thing. And because because I'm a very sociable person, I actually went looking for that community in the online space, through groups and stuff, because I knew I needed that camaraderie to just, otherwise I was going to give up. If someone, if I didn't feel understood by someone, that, I didn't, it's just really hard. And even a few years in, I'm still looking for ways to have that connection on a daily basis, whether it's coffee chat or now we're using Groove just to check in daily, because otherwise you're just there with your computer day in and day out with a physical community that doesn't understand what you do.
Yeah.
And so connecting with people online and through apps is just vital, because it allows us to feel like we're not alone, and we're not following these pipe dreams, that we're all in. There is a sense of we're in it together, because you find a community who kind of gets who gets your perspective, and who gets the struggle, but also understands your why, and this is the reason that you're doing it.
Yeah.
Don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. And it opens up so many threads for discussion. Like, I think loneliness would be one of the main things that nobody talks about as a solopreneur.
Yeah.
And that can be a big thing for anyone, either
And
new
just being
or,
able to talk about what you're doing. Like, I don't
yeah.
know. For example, we've been talking about a lot about prospecting. This week
Mhm.
I'm prospecting. If I say that in real life, you what? You're going for gold? You're looking for gold? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
Like, oh no.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's just being in a space that understands your kind of language.
yeah,
That's very
yeah.
special.
And it's so difficult at times because, like, many times you are the only solopreneur or only freelancer in your circle. And so
Yeah.
people can't relate. And when you don't have a manager over your head, when you don't work in a team,
Manage
then
yourself.
yeah, the procrastination, the self-doubt, the imposter syndrome, the anxiety, the delay in sending an email, whether it even if it is like somebody, I think the most scary email is when somebody says yes, and then you are like,
Yes.
okay, this shit got real, like.
Yes.
And I
You
think
want to
that
call? What do you mean you want to call? Yeah.
and I have faced the challenge myself for so long, where like most of my circle was in a job or in some sort of a corporate structure, and I can't really explain what I'm going through to them because
Yeah.
like they have no idea, and the structures are so different.
I struggle to explain what I do.
Yeah,
Like, like everything is a struggle because it's such a foreign concept.
yeah, and it is. So the if we look at the contrast between the two, in a job, everybody understands, oh, I'm looking for a job, I got a job, I'm going to the office,
Yeah.
my boss is asking me to stay up late. Like all of these things are common
Yeah.
things
In
that
the
people
real.
say and understand. But when we
Yeah.
say, I have a client, but I have to look for more clients or have to put myself out there, or like I am my boss, but I can't come because I have to do the work. And people are like, but you are your own boss. Why can't you
Yes.
come?
Yeah.
And like,
What do
so
you mean you're working? Like
yeah,
you work for yourself. Like, yeah, I'm still working.
yeah. So, and I think with you, the family kind of balances it out, because once the family is in, like there is a, but a lot of people face that challenge also when they are working all the time, because like
Yes.
at the personal front they're not investing that much time and energy, and so it can become a drag. But yeah, this is a real challenge. You mentioned Groove. I'll just share with everyone. Groove is an app where you can connect with other solopreneurs around the world. You can check it on groove.oo. So that is the way. I'll put in the link in the show notes as well. But yeah, Ineka and I met on Groove, so I've met so many good people and good friends
So
on Groove.
grateful to groove.
Yeah, so that's amazing. And I want to talk about also the challenges in entrepreneurship with the variability of income. Like with the when we are in a job, the income is more or less predictable. And in
Yes.
in in case of solopreneurship, it is not. So
No.
like yeah, how has your journey been with money, and how's your relationship with money changed over time?
Hmm. Again, I think um, what's very different for me and from many other people is maybe that I started when I I knew that I wasn't able to invest a huge amount of time.
Mhm,
So my priority was building a business that I was able to dive in fully when I had the capacity. So because of that, I didn't have much of a or as much of a financial pressure. Um, because essentially I was a stay-at-home mom for maybe 2.5 years. But
mhm,
while I was doing that, so in terms of the family dynamics, that was what reviewed me as, I suppose. But while I was doing that, I was also growing my business. I was doing all my back end stuff. I was creating my website. I was, growing community. So that was my focus. It wasn't so much on the financial focus.
mhm,
It was more to make sure that I had enough to cover all my business expenses. I was always going on a course. That was part of procrastination, though.
mhm,
I need to know more. I need to know more. So
mhm,
that is definitely a thing.
mhm,
Um, but yeah, since I've gone into podcast management, it's been steadily growing, but as in, yeah, my capacity and my finances.
yeah.
But it is hard, like especially when you're on social media, everyone's
Mhm,
talking about um making 6 figures and getting to 5K in 3 months. And there's a lot of language that suggests that it's easy.
mhm,
It's not. It's not. And that's that misconception can be hard for people to face, because
yeah,
they come in, they just get the computer and they're ready. And it's like, what? No, like there's a lot of work, there's a lot of slog, let's face it, that goes in before the rewards come. But
yeah,
because of the flexibility and because of the time freedom, I absolutely think that it's worth it.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, I agree with you. And especially this noise on social media is something that really like it irritates me a lot. Not personally, because I have kind of like logged it off,
Yeah.
but when people tell that they are distressed because they see other people talking about how they went from 10 followers to a million followers in 30 days, or and they're selling
These are
their
not true
hacks.
followers, not
Yeah,
true
yeah,
followers.
yeah. And they're trying to sell these hacks and all this. And what that does is a lot of people who want to do their work ethically in a genuine manner with genuine connection, they start feeling like maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe I need to
Yeah,
like
of course.
leave this and like just follow the hacks. But those hacks, I have not seen them work ever.
Yeah.
Like I have not
But this
met
is
a person.
why what you're doing is so important, creating a
Yeah.
community for solopreneurs where um this community can be authentic and vulnerable and say that this is what is happening, because oftentimes people don't want to talk about what rates they're charging, how much they're actually working. Like, you keep seeing these posts about people who make 5K and more a month, but they work 20 hours a week.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Is that 20 hours of client work and then 10 hours or 20 hours of working in your business? What does, how are we defining 20 hours? And just these things, because people are very vague about the details, So it's really nice that the idea that, we have this community where we can be vulnerable and factual about what is going on, and actually speak to the fact that, yes, it's lonely, but you get this. Yes, I'm in a space where nobody understands me in the physical space, but like, there's always going to be, it's really important to have that balance, and having a community that understands you and who can sympathize and support and show accountability. That really helps. It really helps us get through the day, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's a basic need for each of us. But because the tradition, this is a new career, like this is a new, what do you say, a career opportunity which is starting to take over. And so people who are coming here are realizing that like it can be lonely, it can be challenging. And one thing I wanted to share for our audience especially is, like, if you're even if you're following someone on social media, if you can see that human being talking to you as a human being, that is different. But if they are just trying to like showcase how good they are or how successful they are, like, try to avoid that, like that, unless someone can, because I think a lot of people hide behind internet, hide behind Twitter and LinkedIn and all this, and like they are not ready to face another human being and talk to them, and they are just like, every human being is a number for them. And I think it's better to just avoid that kind of a campaign. But this is amazing, Ineka. Anything else you would like to share with the audience? Any message for a budding solopreneur, somebody in the solopreneur journey that you would share, or a mom who is going through?
I would say, when you're starting out, start slow. Sometimes something like building a website sounds so big. Break it down, like break down those tasks and do what you can do when you can do it. And I suppose I'm speaking especially to the moms, like, you can't create time that you don't have, and panicking or being overwhelmed doesn't serve you and doesn't serve your family. So break down the tasks. It probably took me 5 months to finish my website. The first draft of it probably wasn't even that amazing, but I had a website and I was so proud. I then my next thing was to sort out my Dubsado setup so that I could accept payments and do invoices and send out packages. That probably took me a good 7 weeks of systematically, that's all that I did, like, aside from my client work. So just be kind to yourself, but like, do a little bit every day. And a weekend, you've got 7 days of work and 14 days of work, and then suddenly you have a month. Like, if you're doing something every day, it does compound rather. And just keep going. And then get support, join communities so that you get that support. Ask questions, ask for help, because you'd be surprised how many people are willing to give you the time to help you. You just need to make the ask.
Awesome. I think that's a great note for us to like end the conversation. But I would like you to share how people can reach you, and if somebody's looking to hire you or maybe seek your guidance, what is the best way to reach you for them?
I'm on Ineke Camille on all the platforms. I'm now more active on LinkedIn, but I'm also on Instagram, and my website is zootsolutions.com.
All right. So I'll share the spelling and the exact links in the show
Thank you.
notes so you guys can reach out. And it was a pleasure talking to you, Ineka, here. And I think there were so many good insights here that a lot of people can take away and start applying to their own journey. And also, like, it inspires me to like speed up my community setup. And if people want to know about the community, they can visit passionatelycurious.in/community, where we are trying to bring together like-minded solopreneurs who can support each other and help each other be accountable and feel connected and less lonely. And yes, I think that's a good place to end the conversation. Thank you so much, Ineka. It
Thank you for
was
having
a
me.
pleasure. Yeah.
Bye.